So thank you for joining us. My name is Ian. I'm part of the facilitation team with Nicole. I won't repeat everything Nicole said. I'm sure you've heard it at least twice now. But suffice it to say, my job here is to help keep us on time and to help create the space for everyone to share the range of perspectives that they bring. Just as a reminder, this is the Complete Communities room. I assume you knew that already, but this is the room where we'll be talking, among other things, about affordable housing, public realm, and social inclusivity. As you would have seen in the other room, we have a topic-specific feedback forum if you really want to weigh in on the Complete Communities on that specific topic. There are purple pieces of paper on your table. Please use that if you really want to talk about any of the specific Complete Community solutions. If you're interested in talking about something else, you can use that, or you can use the white feedback form that's attached to your agenda that you received when you came in. So just in terms of the process of how this is going to unfold, in a minute, Chris Glasick and Leslie Gash from Waterfront Toronto are going to give about a 12-minute overview presentation, 12 to 13. I will keep time. Gives an overview of the evaluation results related to Complete Communities, and then we will jump into a discussion at the table, same as what you just did, and then we'll report back. So I'm going to invite Chris and Leslie to come up right now. My one request is please don't interrupt the presentation, because if you do, they'll never finish, and then we won't get to the discussion, which is what we really want to do. So that's it for me. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. My name's Chris Glasick. I'm the Chief Planning... not working? Can't hear? Is that better? Okay. My name's Chris Glasick. I'm the Chief Planning and Design Officer for Waterfront Toronto, and I'm joined by Leslie Gash, our Senior Vice President for Development, and we are here to talk about Complete Communities and inclusivity. Complete Communities, as an idea, is really about building neighborhoods that are not just about bedroom communities, not just about building commercial downtowns, but building neighborhoods that have everything in them, a range of housing, a range of residents, a range of jobs, and a range of things to do. And that's very much something that Waterfront Toronto has been doing since its inception. To date, we have built close to 600 affordable rental units that are owned and operated by nonprofits around the city. We have also built about 43 acres of parks and open space and about 26 kilometers of linear parks and trails. And we have also been actively developing community centers and other community facilities to make sure that our communities are in fact able to do all of the things that you want a community to do. And we pay particular attention to this because most of what we're building is new. These are not areas that already have established neighborhoods and communities in them. And many of these things are challenges. So when we did the RFP, when we started this process, we were looking for a partner to help us continue to address these challenges in new ways. Providing housing is a real challenge, and I think affordability is a challenge people recognize as well. For example, we have about 100,000 people on the city's affordable housing wait list. We also are facing an increasing shortage of open space in the downtown. As we densify, as we build, we're finding there's more and more people placing more and more demands on limited bits of public realm. And it's very hard to insert that public realm later. You need to do it at the beginning of your planning. And the same goes for all of the social infrastructure, things like daycares, things like community hubs. You need to plan for those up front, otherwise your community struggles. So the plan that we're working on here today and discussing is really focused on trying to address those problems as aggressively as possible. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie.
Wasted a minute doing this. So I'm just going to give a brief summary of the public feedback today. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'll assume that's a yes. So throughout the public engagement process, Waterfront Toronto has received feedback on the project. The following slides will illustrate a few examples of supportive feedback and areas of consideration on the materials in previous public consultations. So for example, on supportive feedback, with affordable housing, many participants supported having affordable housing and asked if the amount proposed could be expanded. And we actually heard that in the last session as well. Social infrastructure space. There was an interest in more space for social services. However, more clarity was needed on what would be provided. And it was important to the participants that community facilities were kept open to the public and provide flexible hours for different needs and different users. On the consideration side, for family units, participants shared concerns about the small unit sizes and said it was important to provide affordable family-sized units. On public realm, public participants expressed some support for innovations, for example, 3D mapping and green wave that could improve the quality of life and public realm experience in the area. However, participants wanted to understand more detail on logistics, mechanics, and implementation of the proposed innovations. And the summary of the consultation feedback is available on our Quayside TO website. So, a summary of the evaluation results. So, of the total 160 solutions proposed by Sidewalk Labs, 69 are included in the complete community solutions. So a full list and details of these solutions is included in your discussion guide, attachment to pages 7 to 12. So within the 69 complete community solutions, Waterfront Toronto supported 61 of them. Support for certain solutions may change based on feedback from the public, like today, support from from Sidewalk Labs, who need to agree with Waterfront Toronto on the implementation terms, public policy priorities, and support from governments. Each solution is symbolized with a dot indicating the evaluation results, and a version of this graphic is available in the discussion guide on page 9 to see the symbol as it relates to the solutions. So each of these solutions has been categorized within 4 varied degrees of support and 1 for non-support, and we will discuss some examples in more detail. So we also had a summary of our evaluation results. The evaluation summary results do not mean that Waterfront Toronto has approved moving ahead with Sidewalk Labs on a partnership or with this particular project. The evaluation results will be used to draft an innovation plan for Quayside. And feedback from this round of consultation will inform our negotiations with Sidewalk Labs about an innovation plan. So, and I'm going to address this. There was some confusion in the last room. So in the plenary you saw up on the slide, it said 24% affordable housing, which was a rounding. And then this says 20% affordable housing. So this is the 20% that we asked for. And so what's on the table right now is actually closer to the 24%. It's 23.8% because there's an obligation on an existing site that's adjacent, and that will be added to the total here. So,
just if you let her finish the presentation, we'll get right to you.
Okay. So when we released the Quayside Innovation and Funding Partner Request for Proposals, we noted our mandate for 20% affordable housing and asked the potential partner to work with Waterfront Toronto to develop a viable and implementable delivery model for mixed income housing. So in the past, we have participated with the creation of affordable housing and will continue to do so. Traditionally, this is done through setting aside land sufficient to accommodate 20% and operate in public or nonprofit ownership, for example, in East Bayfront and West Don lands. In these cases, the city has found funding for the creation of the affordable housing on the land that we have set aside. So Sidewalk Labs has proposed to provide 20% of the units as affordable housing defined by the City of Toronto. And the city defines affordable housing at or below Toronto's average market rent, so AMR, by unit type. 5% of these units will be deeply affordable. 5% of the total units will be deeply affordable. So examples of current average market rent for the city are $1,374, that's considered affordable, as opposed to $2,300, which is the average market rent in the city right now. Or for a 2-bedroom, it's $1,591 compared to $2,850. We are in discussions with the city, the province, CMHC, and Sidewalk Labs to work on the best affordable program we can get and to explore further funding opportunities. Should we move forward, we will continue to ensure that our commitments to affordable housing are met or exceeded to provide affordable housing units, bricks and mortar affordable housing units, and in perpetuity. So Care Collective is another example of a solution to support. Actually, I should have mentioned that Waterfront Toronto is prepared to invest in affordable housing, and details of that will come through. We're still in negotiations. So Care Collective is also an example of a solution to support and we'll be advocating for government funding in that. So this is a dedicated space focused on health and well-being programming and services similar to a community hub. Community hubs exist in Ontario, and they make it easier for residents to access health, social, cultural, recreational, and other resources together in one location. And that can be either a physical location or it could be done through digital access. The Care Collective is proposed to be in the STOA, space on the ground floor. You'll hear more about that in a minute, which can adapt over time to accommodate the evolving needs of the community. In Quayside, Sidewalk Labs plans to be a catalyst when it comes to promoting health and well-being, not a direct service delivery provider. Waterfront Toronto has indicated support for the Care Collective solution and would work with Sidewalk Labs and our government partners to deliver this solution. Back to Chris.
Thanks, Leslie. Looking at the public realm, this is an example of a solution that we would support with Waterfront Toronto funding, and this is the real-time digital map of the utility network and public infrastructure. Our interest in this is really finding better ways to take care of our city and maintain the city. Much of what gets built, particularly on the waterfront, has a high degree of complexity, is harder to take care of, has higher level finishes, and as we move into more innovative solutions, those in turn will require a higher degree of maintenance. And what this offers is an ability to really understand what is going on underground. In many cases, people are always amazed to hear this. We don't have a very clear picture of what's underground because much of it was built 100 years ago. And when we send people out to rebuild a street or rebuild the public realm, there are a lot of surprises, and this costs extra money, leads to delays, leads to more inconvenience for people. So if we can create an actual accurate digital map, it makes it easier for work crews to go out. It makes it easier to figure out how to design for new conduits and new services that want to be added to neighborhoods. And this mapping system, we think at the end of the day, is something that could begin to reduce the overall cost to the city and hopefully mean that we can deliver a higher quality public realm that doesn't cost the city any more than what it typically pays for taking care of its infrastructure today. This is an example of one that Waterfront Toronto would support with some regulatory change. This is the STOA, as it is called, and the idea of this is something not dissimilar to a big market hall, like a St. Lawrence market hall, but with a much broader diversity of uses in it. So this could include retail or food, but it could also include artist space and studios. It could include live workspace. It could include even light manufacturing. And the intent of this is that it's a very flexible physical space, so it can shift and change and enable the ground floor to be much more responsive to what the community wants, what the community is demanding from one year to the next. Rather than sign the 30-year lease deal with the nail salon, you might be able to have short-term leases where different uses can come in as the demographics change. The space is also intended to be very permeable so that it creates a secondary public realm and a pedestrian network through these spaces. And if any of you are familiar with the Stacked project over on Bathurst, you can almost think of this as trying to implement something like that inside a big open shell at the ground floor, which will also then help create a lot of ground floor animation, make the street active and vibrant, and start to deliver that urban community feeling. This last one I'm going to speak to is an example of a solution that Waterfront Toronto isn't supporting. It's the outdoor comfort system and the building raincoats. We acknowledge that these create some benefits in terms of snow protection and rain protection, but we haven't really seen that the proposed solution goes very far beyond that in providing outdoor comfort, and at the same time has some big trade-offs in the public realm. So from a mobility perspective, we're concerned that placing these big raincoat structures on the public sidewalk will make it harder for people to get around. And there are also questions around whether or not these type of installations in the public sidewalk meet AODA requirements. They may in fact create barriers to the visually impaired who can't really tell or anticipate that they're there. So for all of those reasons, we have decided not to support this particular version of the outdoor comfort. We're still committed to finding outdoor comfort solutions, and we think there are other solutions out there that we would like to see implemented, and we may well come forward with new ones as our process unfolds. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ian.
13 minutes on the dot. Thank you. Perfect. So I know there's one question that we do want to get to from Torben about the affordable housing, but before we do that, I'll just give a quick reminder of what the process is. This should be old news to you by now since you've gone through it once already, but we do have a facilitator at each table, or we should. Facilitator, if you could just put up your hands. So it looks like these two, this table, there's nobody. So if there's two facilitators at any table, then I'll ask one of them to move to this table. And if not, then I'll join you. But if there are two anywhere, then please, okay, perfect. Victoria's gonna go there. So everybody should have one. So they are gonna ask you, the discussion we wanna have about complete communities is if you agree with the conclusions or the results of the evaluation. Do you think they sufficiently address the challenges or not? Are there any solutions that you would like to see prioritized? Are there any that you find concerning? These are really just intended as a starting point or a guideline. If there's something else that you want to talk about, please go for it. The facilitators will make sure that there's space for that discussion too. The plan is for us to have small group discussions, as you just did, for about 20 minutes, and then each facilitator will share 1 or 2 points from the discussion. With whatever time we have left, we'll just have an open conversation. Torben, you did have a question about affordable housing, so maybe we'll just do that one right now quickly, and then... Yeah. Okay, so that's been 20 minutes. What we want to do now is just begin with the report back. I appreciate 20 minutes isn't a lot of time and there's a lot of stuff to get through. So thank you for bearing with us. I'm going to ask the facilitators, I'll start with Meg, to come up. And what each facilitator is going to do, probably similar to what you did in your previous room, is share 1 to 2 points from the discussion. They're not going to cover everything, of course, but we really just want to get a flavor of some of the things that you talked about. So, and if the facilitators are at the table where people are still talking, maybe you could encourage those people to stop talking now. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start with Meg, and then maybe facilitators just come on up and line up so that we don't have to wait, because I've been given the signal that we have to be next door or moving next door in 5 minutes, and we want to make sure we at least get through each of the table reports.
So we had a really interesting conversation. I would say the 2 main points we were talking about was housing affordability. In particular, there was a desire for more affordable housing, literally as in units, as well as percentage, as well as larger affordable units. And we talked a little bit about some of the different ways that inaffordability can seep in, whether through units being resold and also through the spread into adjacent areas of the city. We also talked a lot about data privacy, and there was a real interest in making sure there was a good governance plan in place to ensure the privacy of all residents.
Affordability of housing and also of commercial leases. So the question is, who's going to be accessing this space? We had actually different commentary about the sizes of the units. So discussion of how many people can we get in there so that more people can live and exist in the city close to work. The other main point was about labor. So requests for the contracts to be local, preferably Ontario, Canadian's fine, but asking really the question of who best to benefit from this space. Affordable housing, affordable leases, and local labor.
Thanks, Victoria.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, so the first idea we talked about is the idea of a complete community, something that has walkable areas, a grocery store nearby. We also had the conversation about affordability within, are you going to have a high-end grocery store? We also talked about funding in terms of what is the trade-off, what is the value that Torontonians will receive through all of this, whether it is in dollars and cents or social benefits. And another big topic we had is the concern about the aging community who at my table would love to live downtown and want a caring environment with a high walkability factor and don't want to feel like a last priority or to be pushed out. And there was also a lot of confusion about Sidewalk Labs. Are they owning the land? Or what are they paying the $590 million for? What is their relationship with the developer? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Maybe I'll pull this up. I'm a little bit too tall. There we go. We had a really good kind of high-level discussion at our table. We did go through these solutions, and there was general support for what they can bring to the city, especially kind of issues around affordable housing and sustainability. A few of the kind of points that came up throughout the conversation is the issue of how will 12 acres solve the problems of Toronto. As a test site, obviously it's a test site, but how do you then take the learnings from this site and apply it to Toronto and apply it with agency? Another major issue, there was a lot of support around this project as a whole from our table, but empathy towards people who might not be as supportive, and issues around transparency and communication, and really ensuring that Waterfront Toronto and the facilitation teams move forward with that in mind. Another big issue, or another question I should say, was why the standard is so high for this project, and why this hasn't happened necessarily before with other waterfront projects. Is it because it's with Sidewalk Labs? Is it because we're dealing with data? So just pondering kind of stuff like that. And lastly, just a really sense of urgency from the table on we need to act now, and the fact that there are, you know, public infrastructure projects that happen and then they get pushed over for new government, and just really a feeling from a lot of people that we are behind. We are a city that's behind, and we need to take this opportunity and move forward with it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. We had a really interesting discussion at my table. We spoke about questions regarding who gets access to the affordable housing. One of the questions that arose was, do people who work in the community, do they get first access, first dibs to these houses? And the next point we spoke about was mixed use development, so not just using spaces for one use, but more than one. So a school could be used as a community center, or a community center could share spaces with the school, or share spaces with the school. So shared spaces is another point that came up. And finally, another point that came up was making sure that people from the City of Toronto own the units. So what they don't want is it to turn into another exclusive space, a condominium unit where investors sit on the property and no one else gets access to it, which has now resulted in the increase in housing costs. Thank you.
So with the scale back to specifically 12 acres, how does that impact the notion of the innovation of wood, of timber as a principal building product? There's some question about the viability of the factories that would need to be created to supply this. Very innovative, but would it manage? The point was made, if this test ground of 12 acres succeeds with timber, then those factories would be run off their feet with business elsewhere. The point was made with regard to affordable housing, not to make this, put all the affordability housing issues of Toronto onto the back of this project. Moving forward, make 20% of all new buildings in Toronto affordable. Spread the love around in that regard. And as well, an interesting point made about areas in east of Toronto on the waterfront that are starving for work, to put factories there and then use the lake to ship the products and elements to the site as a way of avoiding the 401 and the environmental cost there.
Okay, so at our table, we generally thought that prioritizing affordable housing was key here, and that we really needed a lot more data presented and more clarity with regards to that. As it stands, people felt that it was insufficient for affordable housing. Also, with regards to public space, how does this project increase public space and access, and will it stay that way? Also, what kind of frameworks are in place for digital innovations? Can we include higher levels of the government with this process? And we generally like the SOA idea that it's not something that's really new, but new for Toronto, definitely, and we're quite excited about that.
We had a great discussion at our table, and I could summarize it under the theme of opportunity and the question of opportunity. So opportunities regarding housing, how can we think and rethink affordable housing, and a general interest in the different living styles that the co-living spaces are able to support. There's a question of flexibility in spaces, and how does that provide opportunities for artists and small businesses and businesses looking for short-term leases. And finally, there was a consensus about opportunity for growth, not just in the Quayside site, but also in the greater Portland's area.
Ian, everybody's ready in the other room when you guys are ready. So maybe top 2 points.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Naz and Kristen, you're up. Quick. Just pick one point.
Okay, we want to prioritize committed space, nonprofit collaboration, and affordable rental housing, number 12, 14, and 56. And we also want to redefine about affordable housing. Right now it is about the average of market. We want to have on the average of income, and we also want to consider seniors for the real-time digital map of the utility network. Our concern is whether it's useful for them or not.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Kristen, you're up.
Great. So question was about data ownership. Want more details so that they can give more feedback.
Okay. We rushed through those last few. Obviously, we're under a bit of a crunch. Please move next door. We'll report back what we can from this, and then we'll have a broader conversation.